Chapter 11 Ads by Pub Future. Dante slowly felt his mind coming to, but he was still so very groggy. His mind was extremely tired after going through that hectic situation with Beatrice. As he had always been on guard, the man was just a 21-year-old, not some 10,000 IQ champion. It was good enough that he didn't show his young age when dealing with the serious stuff, but to expect him to wade through all of that like a seasoned pro with no backlash was asking too much. And that manifested itself in the form of mental fatigue. So his mind was coming to, but it would take some time for the engine to warm up and for his thoughts to come to life. That would have been the case, but his slightly awake mind heard some frightening words. I wonder if this will fit inside him. It's a bit big and it might hurt though, but I've always wanted to try it and he's vulnerable anyway. Immediately, all fatigue was beaten from Dante's body as he jumped up and grabbed his booty while scuttling away. The sheer look of frozen fear mixed with the fact that his eyes were still bloodshot from his deep sleep created a very comical image. Beatrice, who was standing by the bed with an injector in hand, was utterly dumbfounded as she stood there. For only a second, then she burst into uproarious laughter that almost caused her to fall over herself. Her body shook as the injector in her hand fell onto the bed, the bluish liquid within sloshing viscously. Dante slowly came to as his beating heart calmed down, and his horror and fear turned into rage. However, he simply rose to his feet and patted himself while glaring at Beatrice coldly. Beatrice tried to hold back her laughter, but she was gasping at this point and struggling to breathe. She clutched her midsection as she gasped for air in between laughter. Ads by Pub Future. Seeing Dante's cold look didn't make it stop, but she did try to suppress herself more. In the end, her eyes became bloodshot from holding it in and her teeth were about to crack. Dante walked to a glowing door by the right of the bedroom, which was locked. A red circle glowed at the center and it seemed to scan him first before switching to green and allowing him in. The moment he disappeared from sight, Beatrice burst into laughter again, freeing what was held back by sheer willpower. As for Dante, he knew from the downloaded plan of the entire ship that this was the bathroom for the vice captain. What was downstairs was for guests and visitors. The bathroom here was spacious. There was enough space between the toilet and the jacuzzi, shower, as well as bathtub such that even if one released the filthiest and smelliest lumps, it wouldn't reach the place where one bathed. Dante scratched his chin and did his morning do, which was routine for him. Then he walked over to the shower and noticed that while it was kinda high-tech, it was still a very modern design. When he walked in, the door automatically closed and an AI voice asked him how he wanted to shower. The AI chip connected and automatically inputted the settings Dante wanted: mildly hot water and lime-scented soap. This one too had holographic features, so Dante set the background to be his shower at home. The opaque glass that constituted the shower's body instantly became transparent and perfectly reflected the scene of his home's bathroom. Dante had seen this amazing technology with the bed, but damn, it was something else. It really looked like if he opened these doors, he would walk out into his bathroom on Earth. He showered, but almost didn't want to leave as he rarely encountered such a perfect soap and water temperature like this. Not to mention that there was a heap of assistance from the shower itself which had many automated features. Seriously, even if you were the type who was lazy to bathe at home, this kind of technology was meant for you. You'd probably catch yourself showering 10 times a day. Ads by Pub Future. Dante eventually got out and was blow-dried by the shower after he exited. Then a towel was wrapped around him by some robot arms and he couldn't help but feel his dark mood lift up. He came to the door of the bath and exited, but the AI voice warned him that he had a guest in the room in case he was dressed improperly. There, seated on his bed while fiddling with the injector, was Beatrice. When she saw Dante, her eyes roved his body up and down. However, there was a mild look of disdain in her eyes. Yeah, I already knew this, but damn, you are flawed as hell. You are probably the only pure human with such pure genetics that is so deformed. Beatrice stated bluntly. Despite the harsh words, Dante reasonably took no offense. He was not ugly nor unfit by normal standards, he was relatively slim, kinda tall as he was over 6 feet, and handsome enough that it was semi-easy to attract female partners on Earth. However, given Beatrice's flawless body proportions, skin, and her perfect symmetry, which Dante assumed should be the norm for every pure human, he really would look deformed in her eyes since humans on his Earth couldn't customize their genes or enhance themselves using technology. It was like an Earth human telling an intelligent monkey that it was a monkey. No matter how offended the monkey felt and how similar it felt to humans, it was still a monkey. Are we at Earth yet? Dante ignored her and asked coolly, Svel, we're just about to enter the orbital space station. Before we do that, I've got to inject you with these modified gene enhancers I spent all this time working on. Beatrice waved the injector around. Dante's heart skipped a beat. Gene enhancers? Beatrice nodded. That's right, and custom ones for you too. When you entered the ship, your entire body was scanned and uploaded to the internal database, so I had access to a copy of your unique genetic code. Ads by Pub Future. Beatrice hesitated, folded her arms, and then looked Dante up and down. Is it okay if I call you a Neanderthal? Because that's totally what you are. You are such an anomaly. Your genetic code is at the peak of when humankind was still trapped on Earth, just a few years before we began spacefaring officially. It's like you time-traveled forward into the future and appeared on that street, huh? Beatrice asked with a sudden sharp gaze. Dante controlled his reaction forcibly, but Beatrice noticed some tics. No matter how strong the poker face, it couldn't withstand the senses of someone with bionics and psionics of her level, not to mention her base genetic level. To compare, it was like the difference between Superman or the Flash and a normal person. To the normal person, the Flash was talking with them at normal speed, but for the Flash, he was literally slowing himself down to match you. Whatever. So what happens to me if I inject that? Dante asked what was on his mind. Well, first of all, we update your genetic code to our level. There are hundreds of adaptations and modifications to the human DNA that have occurred over the millennia since we left the planet. You have none of those protections. Beatrice answered with a shrug. Ever since I met you, you have been exposed to hundreds of millions of unique bacteria that your body had never adapted for, some harmful and others not. The only reason you haven't melted into goo is because you're automatically disinfected whenever you use a teleporter, when you entered the ship, and when you entered the shuttle. Dante shivered at that. However, we can't have you walking around on Earth while sweating in pain from hundreds of viruses and the like running rampage in your body, Beatrice concluded as she got up and brought the injector near him. Dante took a step back when he saw that huge needle that looked like it could penetrate his organs. However, Beatrice suddenly moved like a cheetah and stabbed the needle into his chest, right into his heart. The pain made Dante almost black out, and he felt his knees go weak. Having your heart suddenly pierced was not something you could picture unless you went through it yourself. What came next was even more horrific as the blue liquid was pumped into his heart right from the tube, and then entered his bloodstream. Dante fell on his ass and coughed painfully, clutching his chest as he felt like lava was flowing through his body starting from his chest. His temperature spiked greatly and he began to sweat. Before he could even scream, he fainted right away in order to protect his mind from the part that came next. As for Beatrice, she carried him and put him on the bed before sitting by the side and watching him quietly. Chapter 12. Dante's eyes snapped open as he took a deep breath and jerked upwards. He noticed that his body was extremely sticky and sweaty, and he suddenly felt extremely uncomfortable. He tried to wipe his eyes, but his face and hands were covered with stuff. When he focused on what it was, he almost screamed blood. There was so much blood. God, all the sticky stuff on him was mostly dried blood and some that was still partially liquid. Even worse, he felt a warmness and extreme discomfort around his groin, and he looked down to see a huge patch of yellow. Not only that, there were some slight hints of brown. Dante closed his eyes and took deep breaths, which was naturally a mistake given the circumstances. However, he couldn't afford to care as he forcibly calmed himself down and refused the urge to snap his own neck. Waking up in filth was not something anyone could tolerate, especially not in this regard. Dante was about to get up and clean himself when a huge torrent of water splashed over him, soaking him deeply. Wakey wakey. You finally woke up after so long, and look at the mess you've made. A familiar teasing voice sounded from the side. Dante looked at his naked body and then slowly turned to glare at Beatrice, who was smirking while holding a large basin of water with a single hand. Before he could protest, she flicked her hand slightly and another batch of water was thrown at him. More than anger, Dante wanted to ask how she had the strength to lift a basin full of water that even two people side by side would struggle to carry, but then realized it was probably a stupid question. Also, the two tubs of water significantly cleared the filth around Dante, which ironically made him feel better. He rolled to the side and stood up, glancing at Beatrice coldly before entering the bathroom. On his way, she smacked his ass and squeezed, causing Dante's face to change. However, he knew he was no match for a woman with genetics like hers if his guess was right, so he continued in and went to the jacuzzi this time. He gingerly entered and allowed his AI chip to interact with the jacuzzi's AI, and the deep cleansing began. Dante spent 3 hours having himself cleaned, scrubbed, soaped, washed, and even almost drowned himself 3 times since he didn't let any part of his body go. When he came out, he felt refreshed in more ways than one. Dante finally noticed that his body felt lighter and his mind felt sharper. His thoughts moved fast and were more organized rather than random blurs that appeared and disappeared like lightning. When he exited the bath, he was curious about what had changed about him, specifically then noticed that the room was spotlessly clean. The bed especially looked brand new, and there was Beatrice boredly scrolling through her holographic screen by the side. When she saw him come out, her eyes lit up slightly. Yes, now that's much better. It's not perfect, but it's nowhere near as bad as before. Dante paused and furrowed his brow. You mean, I look better? But you said the injection was to patch up my DNA in terms of missing protections against viruses and stuff. I don't remember you saying it would enhance my looks or abilities. Dante thought that such a thing would come in a later injection or through some other method. Spell Beatrice shrugged. Hey, the best defense is a good offense. We raise your body's power and increase your genetics, and you'd naturally not be troubled by such viruses or bacteria, right? Dante was speechless. Beatrice pointed a finger to the now spotless bed. You didn't think all that residue was from just filling up the holes in your DNA? Yeah, Dante had wondered about that. Now it made sense. Increasing his body values sharply in one sitting would have drastic effects and would require a deep-set modification. T was not like the natural residents of this universe who had slowly accumulated their current high indexes through genetic evolution over generations. Beatrice just helped Dante skip centuries of evolution in a few hours. Right, how long was I out? Dante inquired as he walked to the closet nearby. About 8 hours. Enough time that I've already sent your physical details down to the bureau, and they've long sorted out your identity and registration. Beatrice replied with a yawn. Dante's eyes lit up. So I can log into the Etranet now? Beatrice glanced at him strangely. You just got an elite pure human citizen ID issued by Earth's bureau itself, and the first thing you think of is the Etranet? TSK. Youth of today, always on their goddamn AI chips. Dante ignored her and checked his AI chip. Greetings, Dante. While you were out, I handled the genetic modification for you and monitored your body in depth. I have screened your current genetics and have compiled them into your SDI. Please check it. Dante followed his AI chip's request and opened his standard display index. User, Dante age, 21, converted to Earth years, race, pure human, 99.9% genetic perfection, strength index, 2.3 agility index, 2.2 dexterity index, 2.3 intelligence index, 2.5 constitution index, 2.1 vitality index, 2.1 bionic level, 0 psionic level, 0 AI chip level, 0.1 superpowers, quantum entanglement. Dante was surprised. Each of his indexes had gone up by exactly 2 points, making him twice as potent in each field as the average pure human in this universe. Ads by Pub Future. Burning curiosity lit up in his chest, and he couldn't help but want to test his prowess. As such, he made a few punching and kicking motions, which shocked him because their potency had increased by leaps and bounds. The current him was no different from a skilled martial artist in a CGI movie, able to perform movements at speeds that did not seem logical. Are you done beating up your imaginary friend for not remembering your birthday? Beatrice mocked from the side while stifling a giggle. However, Dante was too pleased to be angry. Rather than that, for the first time since he met her, he actually smiled at her, causing Beatrice to be stunned. Thank you, Beatrice. I'm very grateful for the upgrade. Dante thanked her sincerely, especially since it was not part of the contract. After all, the Bureau did not know about Dante's poor SDI, as that would raise questions, so Beatrice had only sent his current SDI after upgrading. His AI chip already told him this. Beatrice was silent for a while and then sighed. Whatever, you're welcome. Let's get planetside and check out your villa, among other things. We need to report to the Eternal Academy as soon as possible. A day wasted is one more point of danger to your life when you enter the Zero Gate. Dante nodded and selected an attire from the wardrobe. As you could imagine, the clothes were not physically accessible, rather a long selection was sent to the AI chip from which he could choose. Dante finally got to enjoy using the AI chip thanks to his increased intelligence index, as scrolling through the hundreds of lists was easy for him to process. Previously, when he had been at the spaceport of planet Etonia and had passed by the duty-free shops, he had taken one look at the lists and felt like his brain was about to explode. Eventually, he selected something similar to what Beatrice wore minus her purple color. A skin-tight inner black shirt inside a black pilot's jacket, as well as black leather pants along with fitting black boots. When he turned around, he noticed that Beatrice was looking him up and down with a smile. Good taste, now I won't be embarrassed walking around with you. Dante rolled his eyes and followed Beatrice out of the vice-captain's cabin. They both entered the teleporter outside his room and appeared in the shuttle, as it launched from the battleship and down into the bay. Since they used teleportation, there was no need for disinfection when leaving the ship, unlike when entering. Besides, it was not allowed to teleport into the battleship because what if an enemy used it to sneak in? As for teleporting out, there was no problem with that. The shuttle landed in a parking spot and the duo disembarked from it calmly. Dante saw that the spaceport was far smaller than the one on planet Etonia, but it was far more developed and busier. Even more frightening was the customs queue to enter the elevator leading to the arrival area. Even with AI and robots handling it, the line was long like a winding snake. While Dante was bracing himself for a long wait, Beatrice pulled him to a rather quiet customs post that had only about 3 people there. Each of them was a pure human like them, and they had arrogant and lofty expressions on their faces. Chapter 13. The pure humans in the line turned and saw Beatrice as well as Dante. Their cold expressions softened significantly, like seeing an old friend. They even greeted them with respect when they saw their attire. Greetings, Admiral. Hello, Vice Admiral. They greeted Beatrice as an admiral and Dante as a vice admiral, which left him stunned. He was not even a cadet yet. How did he suddenly become a vice admiral? Beatrice nodded to them amiably and introduced the two of them. She introduced Dante as the vice captain of the Inferno, and when she mentioned her own name, the expressions of the surrounding pure humans changed subtly. Even the AI robot that was handling their details with utmost respect paused and glanced at Beatrice for a second before continuing. Dante noticed this and guessed that Beatrice likely had some other special identity, maybe from a powerful faction or most likely, her clan. Thinking about it, it should be obvious. Dante may not know her age, but she seemed young enough. Not only was she admitted to the #1 Academy's elite branch, but she was a fucking admiral of the Prime Fleet and had her own dreadnought-class battleship which she alone managed. Dante doubted that just being clever would allow one such privilege. She could even fearlessly tamper with his details and sign a contract on behalf of the entire human government. Not to mention she could easily produce a serum for him that upgraded his genes without melting him into primordial soup. He looked at Beatrice's lovely side profile and remained silent. He would wait until she was ready to tell him, as if, the moment he got access to the Etranet, he would investigate everything about her, down to what underwear she liked to wear. There was no way he would remain ignorant about someone like her no matter how good she was to him. Surprisingly, they were given priority in this relatively short queue and fast-tracked. They even got on the elevator alone, forcing those who passed through the normal line and even pure human VIPs to wait for the next round. Ads by Pub Future. Beatrice seemed to treat this as normal, and Dante did not act out of place. As a bourgeoisie kid, he too was given such treatment in select places in America, especially in his city. The space elevator was quite large and wide, with seating areas within. Beatrice stood to the side and beckoned to Dante, who glanced at the seats with narrowed eyes. Don't bother sitting, that's for the weaklings. Stand like a man and feel the G's. Beatrice taunted with a look of provocation. Dante quickly scrambled and seated himself before tightening the buckle, making Beatrice chuckle. If you had been stupid enough to think you could do something like that, I could have watched you excrete everything within your body all over again. Dante ignored her and listened to the countdown, then braced himself. Luckily, when it hit 0, it wasn't like some roller coaster or amusement park ride, but rather a feeling similar to sliding down an inclined slope. When they arrived at the bottom around 30 seconds later, the door opened to show a passageway that led to sunlight. Dante unbuckled and followed Beatrice out and into the world of Earth. It was pretty normal. Dante had watched enough sci-fi and played enough games to see what futuristic Earth would be like. and this was like that, eerily pristine white coating and everything, unnecessarily tall everything, most buildings shaped like mushrooms, walkways that looked like tunnels surrounded by glass, and flying cars. Of course, it was marvelous to see in person, but the very predictable setting made it a bit dull. Dante was tugged by his collar to see Beatrice pull him into a nearby car that was driven by force propulsion. It was black and sedan-like, with a comfortable interior meant for high-class passengers. Dante and Beatrice ended up sitting opposite each other, and the space here was even narrower than the shuttle. Dante sighed and ignored Beatrice, who was smiling at him provocatively. He then looked outside as the car began moving rapidly, heading to their next destination. As he noticed the passing scenery and the large volume of cars, Dante couldn't help but ask, why so much traffic? Why not just use teleporters? Ads by Pub Future. Beatrice laughed softly. Teleporters are banned on Earth. We have used our best space technology to lock down the entire space in the solar system around Earth to prevent enemies from jumping in. Dante thought about it and felt it made sense. How many wars were won using that method before they developed countermeasures? Beatrice smacked her knees together, which naturally smashed one of Dante's legs and made him wince in pain. All of them. Every war using this method was a massive victory. Dante was shocked by this. Then who used it the most? Beatrice glanced at him as if he was dumb. How do you think humanity became the #1 rulers of the universe? Dante was speechless. As they say, no one hated the taste of medicine more than the one who dished it out. After using this cheap method to invade countless systems and win all their battles, it was natural that humankind would be the first to develop countermeasures for it. After all, no smart scientist created a poison without making the antidote first. It was simply toxic behavior to the extreme, bullying everyone with a big stick, then later wearing 3 layers of armor so that no one could use that same stick to beat you back. Dante was proud to be human. Eventually the car slowed down and landed before a giant building. When Dante looked at it, his eyes narrowed as he felt it was familiar. When they got down and walked through the front gate, which was heavily guarded by many cyborgs with laser weapons, Dante's face showed shock as he recognized where he was. This was the White House. Ads by Pub Future. It had been modified greatly and expanded quite a bit, but it still had the familiar shape and outline. When they walked to the entrance, Beatrice was scanned from head to toe, and then Dante too. The door then opened for the two of them and admitted them into a straight, neat hall with cyborgs standing on either side with weapons low. Dante looked at the hall and observed many technologically advanced devices and changes that he could barely comprehend, until Beatrice pushed one of the various doors open and took him into a small office. Seated at the end of the room was a dark-skinned male with square-faced features and a relatively stocky build. He wore a set of navy blue military armor that looked similar to Kevlar but had glowing lights all over. When he looked up from his documents to check who entered, his eyes lightly scanned Beatrice before fixing on Dante and staying there. A frown seemed to appear on his features, but was soon suppressed into neutrality. Admiral Portinari, it's good to see you. I take it this is the fellow you reported about? Dante, I believe? He asked with a surprisingly lighter tone of voice. Beatrice's smile was gone, only replaced by a coldly indifferent demeanor that made Dante feel strange. That's right. I was informed that his ID is ready and his bank account has been issued. The man glanced at her and nodded. That's right. But before I give them out, I would like to ask a few questions. Beatrice's face became colder and even bore a hint of hostility. Director Johnson, are you trying to cause trouble? Remember your place. A hint of anger crossed the man called Director Johnson's face for a split second, but he clearly suppressed it and focused his gaze on Dante. Mr. Dante, I'd like to know if you were coerced by the Portinari family in any way into signing a contract on behalf of the state? Beatrice's face paled as she slammed her hand into the table. Bastard, how dare you claim such a thing? Director Johnson forcibly ignored her and stared at Dante. Dante's expression was slightly confused, but he knew what to do next anyway. Beatrice, please allow me to speak to the director. Dante asked Beatrice with a calm expression. Johnson smiled as if he had won something big while Beatrice froze. She turned to glare at Dante, but he maintained a cold face and looked her back in the eye without any fear. Beatrice felt her chest become stuffy and stomped to the side, not even looking at Dante anymore as she felt her emotions go out of control. Dante then focused Director Johnson. Sir, please explain what you mean. Johnson glanced at the fuming Beatrice and felt things were strange. Why was she showing such a strong emotional reaction just for this guy? Could the rumors be true and the famous xenophobic admiral had found a boy toy? Whatever the case, Johnson pursued his success further. Chapter 14 adds, by Pub Future, as far as I have been told, you were discovered by Admiral Portinari on the remote planet Etonia? Director Johnson asked with a smile. Dante's eyes narrowed. Director, I asked you to explain what you meant about being coerced. Director Johnson's face froze as he clenched his fists under the table but maintained his smile. Beatrice glanced at Dante with a surprised look for a split second before feeling angry again and looking away. To answer that, we need to build up facts, I'm sure you understand, right? Johnson answered with a forced smile. No. I just want to know the raw details of what you meant without adding anything else. Otherwise, I'd like my ID and passage to leave. Dante spoke as he folded his arms. Johnson's eyes twitched. He clearly didn't expect this fellow to be so difficult to deal with. Was he really an uneducated person? When a pure human born outside the control of the Earth Bureau's purview is found, they are supposed to be handed a standard contract from the Human Council in order to grant them special rights and protections afforded most pure humans. Johnson began after taking a deep breath to calm himself. However, the terms in your contract are vastly superior to what is usually offered to any pure human of your stature. So I am liable to believe that they offered you more benefits in exchange for something else, which would invalidate the contract and free you of such unlawful terms. Johnson finished with an amiable smile. Dante listened to it all and went silent. He lowered his head and closed his eyes, taking deep breaths before opening them again. He glanced at Beatrice, then at Johnson, then sighed. Director, with all due respect, if I wasn't so weak, I would punch you in the face. Director Johnson, who had assumed Dante was about to say what he wanted to hear, froze and became confused. What the hell? Where did this come from? Even Beatrice was surprised and finally stopped sulking to glance at Dante, who looked at Johnson with direct hostility. You're a really good fellow. You clearly have some beef with Beatrice and want to undermine her, having chosen the weak and unremarkable little me as the tool to achieve this. First off, your words made it seem like signing a contract in the first place is something illegal, trying to drive a wedge between us and make me doubt her. Secondly, you say offered to a pure human of my stature, so clearly in your eyes, I am a lower class being and have been from the moment I crossed that door. You only smile at me because you want something from me. Thirdly, you want to undermine Beatrice through the contract and probably claim she abused her position, which would have the effect of voiding the contract we signed. Even if you were right and I was tricked into doing something extra, you yourself said it, the terms are extremely good. Losing that would be more harmful than good. Dante sneered. So in this entire farce, the only one benefiting would be you. Under the guise of freeing me from oppression, you would be able to get evidence to attack your opponent while either swallowing up the extra benefits meant for me or passing them to someone else. Director Johnson's face changed greatly as he exploded and slammed his hand on the table. How dare you? Beatrice had a look of suspicion as she glanced at Director Johnson and quickly manifested her holographic browser to check something. When she saw what she wanted, her expression became frosty. What a good ploy, Hector Johnson. You have a nephew who is 13 and in the queue to enter the Eternal Academy. Just by revealing this, everything could be understood. Dante's heart became cold because he had only said those conjectures out loud to close any gap that appeared between him and Beatrice. In truth, he was as lost as a lamb. When Director Johnson first spoke, he suspected that Beatrice was guilty of foul play, which was why he resolutely did what he did. After all, he didn't have any side in this conflict except his OWN.my guy. He only knew Beatrice for a grand total of slightly over 24 hours. There was no way he was going to trust her like a life-and-death friend when he didn't even know everything about her. She had seemingly done him good, but Dante couldn't gauge the value of her kindness because of his ignorance. It could entirely be that everything she did so far was an obligation and she was stringing him along. It could also entirely be that she was strangely generous to him and that wasn't any better. Whatever the case, good or bad, he would be able to tell once he had access to the Etranet and could understand the information posted there. This was why his citizen ID was necessary. This fellow spoke as if what Beatrice did was wrong from the onset, something Dante suspected already, so he took the risk of offending Beatrice to find out more. However, the moment the fellow spoke, Dante knew that this was just a meager political spat between two factions or two persons, and he was just a medium to execute the ploy. When he understood this, he panicked slightly because while it didn't absolve Beatrice of any doubts, it meant that he had estranged their relationship for no fucking reason, and that was detrimental. So he quickly made his stance clear, directly insulting the fellow and displaying hostility to show he was on Beatrice's side. His later conjectures were to make it seem he was a clever bloke who had seen through the ploy from the start and wanted to out him. Adds by Pub Future. But hearing Beatrice reveal this information, his heart went cold because he realized he was likely right. It was that feeling when you swerved your car and avoided a fatal accident, and realized that you could have died just then. Dante didn't have an architect as a father who taught him the importance of understanding the minor details, as well as a chemical engineer for a mother who taught him to always observe and deduce. Who knew what he might have done? Dante stepped back and stood beside Beatrice. I thought as much. The moment I entered, he frowned when he saw me, meaning that I was far less than he expected, which probably gave him the idea that he could deal with me. It made sense, but Dante was not sure of this. He was just speculating, but given the circumstances, a speculation like this sounded like damning evidence. Beatrice snorted. I've already reported everything that happened here to the Human Council. Expect their answer soon. Director Johnson paled. How the hell did things reach this point? All he did was try to use a mediocre-looking pure human without any background to try and one-up Beatrice, his rival from the Eternal Academy. As far as he knew, even if he was right, Beatrice would only receive a slap on the wrist for the offense, and he would be able to torment her verbally whenever he saw her, relieving some of the dissatisfaction in his heart. But things had spun around, and he was now the one frying on the pan while his backing was nowhere near as solid as hers. Before the Human Council, even Beatrice could be a little fearless, but he was the same as any dog on the street. His eyes flashed with hatred. Sitting in a position like this involved a web of interests and decisions that no one could easily account for. In other words, in his tenure of working for the Earth Bureau, he had definitely offended some people who didn't dare touch him because of his position and those he offended them for, but once he lost his position, he lost his value. Who would waste energy to protect him? What benefits would they get from it? He was basically an abandoned dog without even losing his job yet. He and his entire family might suffer a calamity. They certainly will not die, since every pure human was as precious as a 1,000-year-old ginseng. They also would not be forced too low, since every pure human had sufficient welfare. But even if you had money in your pocket, it wasn't nice to be beaten up every day by hooligans, was it? Director Johnson breathed deeply, but did not do anything. Attacking Dante or Beatrice would yield even worse consequences, and trying to tamper with the system for petty revenge wouldn't work with Beatrice's background. As such, the man took a small tube and tossed it to Beatrice, pointing to his door. There is your ID and your AI chip infusion. Now get the hell out of my office before I call security. Dante and Beatrice shared a look and left the office, smiling smugly on their way out. Chapter 15. So, did you actually report him? Dante asked as they walked out of the former White House building. No, of course not. Beatrice shook her head. Dante smiled in approval. It's better that way. He will be grateful to you, and now you have blackmail on him. You can get stuff like this done much easier next time. Beatrice smirked and folded her arms. Not only that, but he would be in a worse position and have nothing to lose if I did report him. I don't want someone like that having hatred towards us. Who knows what he can do? Dante shrugged. He doubted that even if the fellow went crazy, he could do any harm to Beatrice. As for him, Dante, there was no telling what could happen, so he obviously wouldn't complain. When the duo sat in the car, Beatrice gestured to the tube with her chin. Inject the stuff and familiarize yourself with your new identity. You'll need it since we're off to your potential villa right now. Dante glanced at the injector and remembered when Beatrice stabbed his heart with the gene enhancer. His heart couldn't help but become cold and his resolve wavered. Dante firmed his mind and brought the needle to his arm, ready to stick it in. Beatrice looked shocked and hurriedly stopped him. What do you think you're doing? She asked with a reprimand. Dante stopped and glanced at her with confusion. Is there a problem? Of course there is. Where do you think you were about to inject yourself? Your arm. Are you mad? she shouted with increasing intensity, making Dante frown. Shouldn't it all be the same? The bloodstream is the bloodstream, Dante argued as he brought the injector away. No, not in this case. You are injecting foreign-coded nanites into your body that are going to come together to form your AI chip, or in this case, upgrade your AI chip to the level 1 standard. You think this is something you can just do with ease? Beatrice chided with a look of disapproval. Dante looked down at the injector, then up at the solemn Beatrice, and his eyes narrowed. I don't believe you. Why didn't Johnson inform me of this, and why aren't there any instructions on the tube? Beatrice tilted her head like she couldn't believe this garbage. You mean the guy you just offended and outed as a corrupt official, who thinks he's about to lose his job because of you, would tell you common information to us that we all know is actually crucial to you? Wow. Dante's lips twitched. Besides, he knows I am with you, and there is no way I would make you take the wrong path. If you do, the blame falls on me, not him. Beatrice waved her hand and explained. Okay then, where am I supposed to inject? Dante asked with exasperation. Beatrice pointed to different spots on her head. This is going directly to your brain and needs the best access, so anywhere on your head would do. Your neck, your cheeks, your nose, or even your ears. Beatrice folded her arms coolly. Personally, most people do it in their eyes. It's more direct and the safest, and there's no pain since hey. Dante ignored her and stuck it in his arm, choosing a suitable vein and gritting his teeth from the short stab of pain. He then pushed the substance in slowly until the tube was empty and then removed it. Beatrice's expression was ugly and she sulked as she leaned back into her seat. She glared at Dante with dissatisfaction and complained. You selfish guy, that was my last chance to trick you. After you get your citizen ID and your AI chip is updated, you can just search these things up. Dante glanced at her, but his heart couldn't help but skip a beat. This woman loved to cause trouble too much, and he always had to calculate the meaning of her words as well as the likely truth behind them. This, plus the unfamiliar environment, was why Dante was so cold, always frowning and acting wise. He felt like the moment he let up and showed his normal self, who was pretty above average in this regard, he would be played to death. With his citizen ID and an upgraded chip, this should change. Dante closed his eyes and felt a wave of coolness in his brain. He literally felt the insides of his scalp shift a little, but apart from feeling gross and weird, there was nothing else but the refreshing coolness. Eventually, the shift came to an end and Dante felt like something new was in his mind. Something far more present and potent. Greetings, user Dante. Since I have already registered your usership, I have attached your citizen ID and automatically listed you in the Pure Human database. You already have a preliminary idea of my capabilities from when I was partially functional, but I will divulge the rest. As you know, AI chips are only as good as their users. Our storage and computing power are based off of your own brain power. However, my computing abilities have been greatly optimized and can do 10 times what I could before while using 10 times less of your brain's resources. Also, I will always have a connection to the Ethernet, but without a terminal, it would be sector-based and quadrant-limited. To access all of the Ethernet with no lag or delay, you would need a quantum terminal like on the Inferno. In times of emergency, I can take over your physical functions to ensure your survival at all costs. I can control everything you wish to control that is network/digital based at any time. Some other functions are being uploaded to your mind. You can ratify them at your own pace. Dante was surprised. This communication within his mind was far faster than before, and only less than a picosecond passed in reality as he learned this. Also noticed that the information uploaded to his mind was part of his memory and had already been processed. He only needed to casually access it to remember what it said. That was exceedingly convenient. Dante opened his SDI to check. User, Dante, ID number, Dante10998-03-15, age, 21, converted to Earth years, race, pure human, 99.9% genetic perfection, strength index, 2.3 agility index, 2.2 dexterity index, 2.3 intelligence index, 2.5 constitution index, 2.1 ads by pub future vitality index, 2.1 bionic level, 0 psionic level, 0 AI chip level, 1 civilian category, superpowers, quantum entanglement. Dante put that aside and finally got to what he was looking forward to all this while, The Etranet. The moment he accessed the Etranet, Dante felt the same wonder he did when he first logged into the internet. But this was grander since he was directly accessing with his mind. He felt like his mind was sucked into a vortex and then appeared in a white room. In the white room, a terminal stood in the center that was glowing with a resplendent light. Dante looked around and realized that he could control everything in this room. So he replicated his bedroom at home, and it was done to perfection. Even the terminal melted and transformed into his laptop at his desk, so he sat down and accessed it. When he did so, his eyes flashed with many weird symbols and signs unbeknownst to him. Dante was fed information about the Etranet to his mind by the AI chip, which was the intermediary for the connection. He was given the equivalent of a basic tutorial on how to use the Etranet for all newbies logging in with their citizen ID for the first time. After he processed the information, he sighed and felt amazed. This kind of network had been theorized on Earth as many scientists and researchers strove day and night to complete it. But here it was, and in the tutorial, the basic framework of this was easily explained. All the fundamentals that scientists on Earth lacked were common knowledge here. There was no search engine for this kind of network. Anything you could think of could be accessed by you at any time and at the speed of thought. For example, Dante curiously searched for how to achieve controllable nuclear fusion, and he was led to many sites for basic primary school science to help kids pass their third-grade exam. Dante was thoroughly speechless, almost had a breakdown on behalf of all the nuclear physicists of Earth. Something they strove for and were stumped by even to the modern day was something that children by the age of 8 were writing for their third semester exam. Above that was dark matter energy, antimatter energy, psion energy, natural energies, and more, studied by kids all the way to 12th grade. The various forms of energy above this were for higher students and required specialization, like what we all experienced in senior high ongoing. That meant that these science fiction and almost pseudoscience energies believed to be alien tier tech on Earth were general knowledge things all beings of this universe were supposed to know.